What's up, YouTube? IHOLDSHIFT back with some more Fort Worth kind of inside looks. And if you watched my previous videos, I was telling you how I was going to go over in specific the teams that made changes. I decided to change that format around and go through each of the pools by each of the days and let those kind of be the ways that we look at some of these new rosters more in-depthly. So for this video, we'll be looking at the top, starting with Pool A. We'll give you a quick look back to remind you what the pools look like, and we'll just kind of go through each of the teams top through bottom and let you know what I think about them, and end the video with some predictions on who I think will end up being the top two from these pools. And again, if you're not familiar with the format, the top two will go into the championship bracket. The bottom two will have to go down to the losers bracket of that championship bracket and really fight for their lives throughout. So getting in the top two spots, crucially important. Let's start up top. Gen.G is the first team up, as they are coming in, obviously, sitting at 6-1. One of the best teams from Division A, actually, the best team from Division A. So they will have the #1 spot coming into this. And you take a look at the rest of this, what happened with this roster, and a lot of things did obviously change. So as we take a look at it, of course, you're looking at Spacely getting dropped, and in favor of that, you'll be seeing the addition of Envoy from Midnight Esports previously. And again, this team is a little bit all over the board. Of course, the 6-1, a lot of people were sitting there wondering, well, why do you make a change if you're sitting at 6-1? But I think some of their specific stats will start to tell the tale for you. Now, of course, perfect in search and destroy overall, but you take a look at what they were able to do or not able to do successfully in their hardpoint and their control, and you have to take a wonder and say, is this team, as it was, a major contender? And the answer, honestly, was not definitively yes. I wouldn't say it was definitively no, but the fact of the matter was they were sitting on this kind of conversation point of, did they have the ceiling to reach a world championship status? I think a lot of people would have likely said no, just based on the fact that you look at the respawns, and they were sitting at 6-8 in hardpoint, 4-3 in control, and they were at a minus differential in their hardpoint score averages. Now, yes, being saved by your search and destroy and saying that search and destroy can win championships is true, but do you really figure that this team can go undefeated in search and destroy throughout the rest of the year? Probably not. You have to get better in the respawn if you want to be a major contender. Being able to sub out Spacely for Envoy is actually, I would say, one of the best things that this team could have done. You take a look at these two players side by side, and just briefly, because I don't have cards for it, I'm going to talk just specifically about Spacely. His search and destroy was not super terrible, but again, this team was 9-0, so his search and destroy KD sitting at a 1.15 is not bad, but his respawn KD was at a 0.88. Let's take a look at what this new roster is, and I have to give huge shout outs for all these player cards. You guys know how much I love production quality, and Lion Man on Twitter, he's been doing these production cards, and I asked him if he would be interested in helping me out by doing these cards for these teams specifically. He said absolutely yes. So if you're interested in this kind of content, you guys need to go follow Lion Man on Twitter. He does incredible graphics work, and I could not be more proud to showcase his work on this channel. So here are the teams. Here is the team as you take a look at it here. Again, you take a look at just these KDs overall, and things look pretty solid. Especially take a look at Envoy, 1.06 in the respawn KD category, 1.07 in the S&D, and this is on a team that, yes, was playing well, but the #4 sub overall in the SMG gameplay when it comes to the respawn KD, number 22 overall in total. This is a role that you need to have solid gameplay with, and seeing as how things were going with Spacely beforehand, when it came down to not winning very many face-up gunfights, you need to be able to kind of bone yourself up in that department. So when you take a look at this, Havoc mixed with Envoy should make for a very interesting dynamic, and this is absolutely an upgrade, I think, from where Spacely was previously. Again, a little bit of disappointment for a lot of the community, because Spacely, he was the namesake of this team, but with internal issues and him just not playing as well as the team needed, I think that this is absolutely an upgrade as you take a look at where this team was versus how it needs to be as it contends not only for Fort Worth, but in my book, more importantly, for a world championship. Now, the conversation point for this team is, will this be a team that will win Fort Worth with this one change? And I can't definitively say yes, but it definitely makes them more of a contender. Will it make them enough of a contender to compete with the likes of a team like Optic? I personally don't think so. But when it comes to this pool specifically, I think you'd be pretty hard-pressed to say that this team will not finish in the top 2. I've got them finishing, obviously, in the top 2 in some fashion, as you take a look, again, versus Heretics, versus UYU and Denial. You take a look at what this team has done against these squads in the past, and yes, they're obviously in the same division as a team of like UYU, and they won that matchup there 3-1, but they also have played overtime esport before it became Denial in the pools at the Pro League qualifier where they lost 0-3. So there is some familiarity here with this team versus the other teams they've played in this pool. Again, a lot has changed since the Pro League qualifier, especially with Team Spacely, well, Team Spacely then versus Gen.G now, but also with the improvement we've seen from a squad like Denial when they were previously Overtime Esport. I still have this team finishing up top. I think you'd be hard-pressed to say otherwise based on who they have. And again, Envoy absolutely is an upgrade. I think, just generally speaking, he's 100% an upgrade as you look at this team going forward. So let's switch things over and talk about Heretics. As we take a look at Heretics most specifically, they finished off at 5-2. Very, very respectable in Division B. Obviously, starting off 4-0 and then only going 1-2 in the second week of Division B was a little bit of a letdown for these guys. But the fact of the matter is, this is still a very strong team and one to very much be scared of. The biggest question mark for me when it comes to Heretics in specific is the simple fact that will this team show up in the SMG gameplay? We've seen that Lucky, Sukri, and Journey can all hold their own at the Pro League level. The teams and the games that they've lost have been really coming down to the fact, will the side of Methods be able to do something with Metals in the SOG line to actually run up the score a little bit on the Respawn in specific? This is a team that has been very good across the board, 7-5 in Hardpoint, 5-4 in Search and Destroy, and 4-3 in Control. And most of those averages are actually pretty close. There haven't really been too many blowout wins for this team, at least not as much as you would have liked to have seen, I think. But the simple truth of it is just that this Heretics team is very good. Obviously, being in Division B, they've played up against Denial in the past. They went 3-1 against them there. And then as far as other teams they've played up against, the answer is none. They did not play up against any of the other teams in this pool in their Pro League qualifier pool. So there's a little bit of unfamiliarity with this squad up against the likes of UYU and Gen.G. But that's not to say that they haven't been doing their work. And that's the biggest thing. This Heretics squad has been at the Optic LAN getting themselves ready. They have at least two different coaches, so that you know that they're doing the VOD review. They're going to get individually better, but beyond that, they're going to be prepared for the teams in this pool specifically. I think this team has a very strong chance at sitting in the top 2, but I would not be surprised to see them drop a game against a team like UYU. Or even Denial, depending on how they play. It just comes down to who shows up on that day. And that's the biggest thing for me when it comes down to the Fort Worth pools, is that it simply is one day of pool play. You play all 3 games in a single day. So if you don't show up hot that day, you very well could drop maps. And especially against a very solid team like UYU, which we're about to talk about, I could see Heretics potentially losing that game. It just comes down to, will they be able to hang with the likes of Gen.G, and can they actually win 2, if not all 3 of their games to stay in the running for a top 2 spot. But a team I want to focus on more is UYU. Again, if you're unfamiliar with the change that happened here with UYU, they were able to drop away Skies and Proofs as well, but they pick up Parzelian from Midnight Esports, and this is an absolutely monumental upgrade for UYU. I've been nothing but impressed by Methods and Mayhem on this roster. And yeah, you could sit there and say that, you know, Skies wasn't exactly a hindrance, but when you looked at the help that was needed for Proto and Knight, Skies wasn't able to really maneuver around the map as freely as a player like Parzelian can. Also important to note that Beezy is also a substitute for this role, or for this team rather. I don't expect to see him playing, but regardless, you take a look at the team card here. Parzelian, the #1 AR in the game stat-wise for Respawn, #2 overall in total, and not including SMGs. And you take a look at the player to his left, that's your #1 overall. This team is going to be absolutely scary when it comes to the Respawn, which has not been too far away from the trend considering where they were before. They were 6-6 on Hardpoint, sure, not the greatest. 4-3 in control, sure, not the greatest, but they've been pretty solid all the way across the board when it comes to being able to perform against other teams in that caliber. The biggest question mark has been, what are they going to do in the respawn? And you take a look at Barzillion once again, not the greatest search and destroy KD, but you think about the impact that he had on Midnight, and this is 100% an upgrade from what Skies was able to bring, which was honestly not very much. His S&D was a little bit higher, but his overall KD was that was lower. So you take a look at a player like Barzillion, what he's able to bring with an ICR in hand, but also a Maddox when necessary. And this is an upgrade, I think, by far for the side of UYU. I'm very impressed with this roster. The simple truth comes down to, can you get Knight and Proto up in their KD department? Can they start winning more face-up gunfights as this SOG line? Because Mayhem, Barzillion, and Methods are not going to be able to do it all on their own. They need this SMG gameplay to get a little bit more online. So you look at Proto, you look at Knight, you take a look at these names compared to that of like a Huke or a Pristini or a Scump. They're not in that same ballpark. They need to start to get to that level if UYU wants to be a major contender. However, again, you take a look back at what this team has been able to do in the past, and it's been pretty solid. You take a look at their performance again versus Gen.G. It was a 1-3 loss, but that set was actually relatively close. A 250 to 208 win on Arsenal, a 213 to 250 loss, and then you take a look at the S&D. It was a 6-0 loss against Gen.G on payload. The control was very close. This map very well could have gone to 5 if the control starts to go their way. The biggest question mark comes down to, can they start to do better in the, not their control, pardon me, in the search and destroy specifically? That's the biggest question mark for this team. And you take a look at what they were able to do in the qualifier. Of course, they finished in the top 2 in their pool, which they didn't play up against any of these teams, but you take a look at the big wins. The 3-1 versus Red Reserve is very impressive, but you also have the 0-3 loss to Evil Geniuses and the 2-3 loss back against Imperial in the day at the Pro League qualifier. So I have very high hopes for this team. I think they could take a game versus Gen.G, but more realistically, I think they have a very strong chance versus Heretics. I personally think there's going to be a surprise here in this pool, and lo siento, mis amigos de España, but I think UYU will actually be the number 2 team in this pool. I actually see them beating Heretics and going the distance and actually being a major qualifier. If they do not finish top 2, I still see this team making a major run and finishing potentially in the top 8 when it comes to Fort Worth. I have a lot of faith that this roster is going to throw some fireworks up when it comes down to it. And we'll finish off this pool by talking about Denial, and everyone seems to still be kind of sleeping on this team. You take a look at what they were able to do in the past, and yes, it's not the most impressive thing in the world when you take a look at what their win-loss ratio is. Of course, a 2-5, 10 and 18 in maps, but the biggest thing is they've been pretty consistent across the board. Yes, they obviously have minus differentials when it comes to all of the modes and maps specifically, but their averages are relatively close together, especially in the search and destroy. That's my biggest thing with this team, is they have not been great in the control. They've been hot and cold in hardpoint, but they've been very consistent in search and destroy, averaging 4.25 rounds for them a game in search and destroy and giving up 5.13. So those search and destroy games have been relatively close. Most of their games have gone above the 3-point differential for them. They have only lost 1 game 2-6, and that was against a very strong E United team when they faced them in week 4 overall. So you take a look at this Denial team, and I honestly think that my power rankings, I had them in the 15th spot, and this is not a favorable pool for them. Maybe they can squeak out some magic versus a team like UYU if UYU does not perform to my expectations based on their moves. But honestly, I don't see them winning a game here. It would just come down to what their bracket looks like when it comes to the losers bracket. They're obviously, I don't think, going to be finishing in the top 2 unless something crazy happens and they outperform everyone's expectations. I see them going down to the losers championship bracket to start, and it just depends on who they play there. Will they be able to make a little bit of a run? I think they absolutely can, especially when you look at the other teams that could potentially be in the bottom of their pools. It just comes down to who they get matched up against, I think, personally. But in this pool specifically, I honestly see it going Gen.G, UYU, Team Heretics, and Denial. But honestly, that UYU Heretics is going to come down to that head-to-head matchup, I think. I think Gen.G wins out completely. I don't think Denial wins a game, and just from there it comes down to what happens between Heretics and UYU. Regardless of what happens, whoever finishes in that second spot between UYU and Heretics, I think either of those teams will make a pretty considerable losers bracket run. So that's where my predictions are. If you're a betting person, keep your eye on UYU because I have high expectations for this roster to do well. I would be severely disappointed if they didn't. I think that the upgrade has been absolutely phenomenal for them, and even for Gen.G, I think with Envoy being in the mix, I think this makes this team much more of a competitor than they would have been with Spacely. But I think it's still going to take some time, as this is a team that's very well coordinated on positioning and movements together, and just throwing an Envoy at the last minute will be a little bit shaky, I think, at times, especially when they come up against Resiliency. However, I still think that they win out this pool. It just comes down to what kind of a bracket run can they make throughout Saturday and Sunday. Those are my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think, though, below in Pool A specifically. Who do you have at the top, and who do you think out of this pool will have no chance at all? And will there be a potential Cinderella run for one of these teams in that losers bracket who finish in the 3 or the 4 spot in the pool? Let me know what you think. I'm going to have more on Pool B, C, and D just before Fort Worth starts. And of course, I'll have regular uploads throughout the weekend recapping the day's events and some of the big storylines from them. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, I would be very appreciated, and of course, very welcoming to you. If you do subscribe to the channel, it'll be a pleasure having you guys. And if you want to join me on my Discord, it's also in my description links below. We do talk about the games routinely throughout the weekend, so please feel free to drop on in, say hi, and join the conversation. We'll be happy to have you. Until next time, though, I'll catch you guys later. Keep holding it down. Later, bye-bye.